When I first started my career as a construction equipment journalist, there was a guy called Rodney Byles who worked for a rival magazine called New Civil Engineer. He was maybe 10 years older than me, and while others were fawning over equipment manufacturers in the hope of securing advertising cash, Rodney was notoriously bristly and curmudgeonly. He was also very, very funny. In fact, the comedian Jack D may well have based his stage persona on old Rodders. Rodney Byles would listen intently to press conferences in which manufacturers told us what they wanted us to know. He would then write an article that largely ignored all of that, and instead he told readers what they needed to know. Rodney Byles in my industry was a maverick. He was my idol. Over the years, I found myself attracted to the maverick type, those that march to the beat of their own drum, sometimes literally. Mick Jagger might be the face of the Rolling Stones, but for me, Keith Richards, part fossil, part pirate, occasional guitarist, he's the cool one in the band. Pete Townsend wrote the songs for The Who, and Roger Daltrey twirled his microphone, but tucked in the background was the real star of the show, drummer Keith Moon, a certified lunatic with drumsticks. And then, of course, there was David Bowie, the Mavericks Maverick. Whenever popular culture veered off in one direction, you could always find Bowie heading the opposite way. I like Robert De Niro and Al Pacino as much as the next movie fan, but hellraisers like Richard Harris, Peter O'Toole, and Robert Shaw always seem to enjoy their lives and their fame a whole lot more. Now, over the years, the construction equipment sector has thrown up a few mavericks of its own. JCB of today, for example, is the epitome of glossy professionalism, but the man who started it all, Joe Bamford, was a rebel with a cause. Likewise, over in Italy, Marco Laurini wears his maverick badge with pride. Sadly, however, it appears that the Mavericks are a dying breed. And following Paul Brown's funeral last week, it feels like they have just taken a step closer to their ultimate demise. Much of Paul Brown's Maverick streak was inherited, of course. His father, Claude, was a larger than life character who could bend the entire demolition industry through sheer force of will. It's little wonder that Claude Brown and his compatriot, Sidney Hunt Sr., are still hailed as heroes within the UK demolition industry. They came from an age when being a maverick wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Those days, like the crawler cranes and the wrecking balls they used, are gone. Today, we live in an age in which music is auto-tuned, meaning every note is pitch perfect and utterly lacking in soul. Social media feeds bombard us with people possessing perfect bodies, perfect teeth, perfect hair, living perfect lives. And all of that has seeped into our industry. LinkedIn profiles are illustrated by airbrushed and photoshopped images that make people look less like demolition professionals and more like movie stars. Articles, blog posts, and speeches are passed through AI filters to remove all traces of negativity, passion, and humanity. New ideas are greeted with suspicion, and innovation is heresy. We used to say that opinions are like arseholes. Everyone has one. In today's world, opinions are like tonsils. You're better off without them. Industry leaders come and go, each one a clone of the last, echoing and repeating the thoughts of their predecessors, although at least Adrian McLean has had the balls to shake things up a bit. And I see all of this playing out so clearly because my industry, the media industry, has already been down this path. We drank the Kool-Aid years ago. We sold out. Where we once had Rodney Byles telling readers what they needed to know and holding equipment manufacturers to account, we now have so-called journalists telling them what they're being paid to tell them. We have influencers telling you this week that the machine behind them is the greatest in the world before telling you next week that another machine is the best in the world, simply because the check from the second manufacturer is now cleared. Seriously, how much credibility would the old Top Gear have had if week after week Clarkson, Hammond, and May told you that each new car was perfect? Now, thankfully, the removal of Mavericks in my industry has merely changed the words. Negativity has been erased, and as a result, readers and viewers are just less well informed. However, the loss of Mavericks in the wider industry is far more damaging. A failure to forge new paths leaves the industry set in its ways while the world moves on. If we continually trot out the same worn-out cliches, we just commit ourselves to continually repeating the mistakes of the past. On Friday last week, I attended the funeral of former NFDC President Paul Brown. His family gathered to say goodbye to a husband, father, and grandfather. His mates were there to bid farewell to a good friend. Many from the demolition industry were there too. None of them said it, but I think we were all thinking it. Paul Brown was a white rhino, possibly the last of his kind. With his passing, the age of the demolition maverick may just have ended.